everybody thinks about AI as taking human jobs. This is where I think it's going to create a step function change in how humans do their work. Imagine the smartest brain at your company that is constantly learning. It has the context of the past and it's learning about the present. And it's also starting to decide predictions about the future that it's going to go test. To your point, that's usually in spreadsheets and some Google Docs and some whiteboards. Now that gets consolidated into one place. And not only is that consolidated into one place that the technology is powered off of, but that humans have access to. So your first employee or your next employee who starts on Monday immediately has the same level of context and knowledge that somebody's been with the company for years and years and years. And you've never seen the power of that before. So think about onboarding moving a lot faster, thinking about that tribal knowledge that is truly unlocked, but is preserved as the organization transforms.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I wear a bunch of different hats, including running an agency, managing millions in search, millions in social, millions in programmatic, not so many millions in CTV, but some in CTV. So because I'm constantly struggling with my teams with media mix and creative mix, I'm super excited to be chatting with Marco Matos today, who's one of the founders of Adora. So let's start with the origin story, Marco. Like, what was the catalyst where you decided, okay, here's a problem nobody else can solve the same way we can solve it, and here's what we built?
Thanks, Kevin. Great to meet you. Before I answer that question, I should answer why I believe I'm able to solve this problem. So I'm an electrical engineer by training almost 20 years ago at Princeton. And after that moment of graduating, I really spent the next 20 years building ad tech products at places that brands hate to spend money. Think walled gardens. I started my career at Microsoft, moved over to Google, where I spent a lot of time measuring online behavior and engagement and offline conversions and effectiveness at a small little product called YouTube. After that, I was a product lead at a company called Facebook, now Meta, really focusing on digital ad effectiveness, on exposures for reach, and really sucked my teeth in understanding optimizations, ad auctions, measurement data analytics, and then most recently a product executive at Pinterest, where there we truly believed content and ads were one and really thinking about the seamless experience. All of that to say is I lived through alphabet soup, GDPR, CCPA, ATT, and as most marketers will tell you, over the last 5 years, you are seeing 50 cents on the dollar in terms of cost reduction, in terms of performance reduction and cost increases, whether it be ECPM, your return on ad spend. And we can debate why, right? Whether it's user privacy, we can talk about the ad auctions just getting more expensive and more dense. I just saw a recent article that Meta's overtaken Google as the number one digital property. But the reality is, for decades, walled gardens have told you, brand, hey, give us your data through APIs and through pixels, and we'll help you optimize that content on our platforms. And that's been a tough proposition from a brand's perspective because most brands spend on a lot of different channels. They know their customer really well from a consumer perspective, but they don't understand how to reach their customer, or they don't sometimes understand all of the nuances and how to go from a personalized message to actually meeting the marketer or the consumer where they are. So when we started Adora, my co-founder has a background in customer data platforms. He built a company there. And we really got together to say, what if we just brought the technology to where the data already sits? We believe advertisers now have the sophistication of organizing their customer data, knowing what's going to resonate with them, knowing what products are selling, and we just need to help them reach their customers with a more efficient and simple modification. Now, at the time, AI was very nascent, and most marketers were still reticent to think about AI in marketing. And today, obviously, that's a thing of the past where all marketers are thinking not just about how to use AI, but really like what's the post-production where they want to deploy it. So the origin of Adora really comes from the premise that advertisers know best. They know where their consumers are, and they're really trying to think about how to create personalized experiences across the entire funnel and utilizing democratization of technology like AI and Adora, how to make that more efficient and really how to get the most on their marketing investment.
Well, that's a great backstory to why you've essentially built the system to do that. Like I always like to tell clients and prospects and pretty much anybody who will listen that like right audience with the right message at the right time is really that key intersection where marketing can be super powerful, right? Upper funnel is going to be a little different than lower funnel demand harvesting. And a lot of folks, right, if you're thinking at the margin, which we like to think at the margin, like where should the next best dollar go? If you think about your media that way, sure, you can do that. You can do the analysis, understand the marginal incrementality of each channel within the channel and across channels. But that often ignores the creative, right? Because if you don't have the right creative there, then the channel underperforms. But it could have performed better if it had had better creative, right? So how did you guys factor that in as you were building this? Because obviously you can't go micro segment down to the individual person in many of the platforms quite yet on creative messaging, but there may be segments that different creative resonates really well with, and not every platform will give you the opportunity to segment it quite the way you want. So you now have this CDP that has all this great information in it, but now you have to put it into practice. So how did you guys attack that?
Yeah. Coming from inside the walled garden, it's always been obvious to me that the platforms like Meta and Google are best in class at matching content to people. The problem with that is most brands and advertisers don't have enough content. And most of the time, when they have a set of assets, they're asking you to utilize those assets across all the walled gardens, when in reality, engagement models are different. The way I consume content on Pinterest versus Meta versus Snap are all going to be different. So why are you using the same content? And for an advertiser, it's very difficult to think about what's performing best. How do I get granular data, not just by channel, but also by channel by audience? So when we started to build Adora, we thought, okay, great. We're going to build this AI model that's unique to every single brand, that's going to do this deep analysis on their data, that's going to understand their historical campaigns. And every advertiser loved the idea. And they said, great, Marco, here are my 5 ads. Go place them everywhere and get me better returns. And you're like, oh, dear God. So what we quickly realized was if we were able to build an AI model that understood their customers, what if we actually turn that to help them with content generation and specifically on understanding their product catalogs, their product authenticity, their brand expression? And what we realized very quickly, not only could we create content with AI, we could analyze content and evaluate content with AI. And what went on the path with our customers, on our founding club members, we realized with this ability to understand and how to truly optimize Meta would be very different than the data that you were looking at to optimize Pinterest or Google or some of these other platforms. And most advertising teams don't have the resources, the time, the capacity to look at channel by channel very deeply to understand how to get the most of that. And I've spent many years on the inside of the belly of the beast, so I've seen the data that shows it's seasonal. Q4 auctions are far more expensive than, say, Q2, Q3. The way patterns shift, and we all live this day to day, trends are moving so fast that by the time you have an MBR or QBR from your partners, that trend is lost. So most of the measurement that you're seeing are lagging indicators. We try to think about a way of how do we solve this in more real time? So the system allows us to help you generate content. It takes content you've already created. It creates a variety of different formats for them. And specifically, my favorite question to ask, hey, Kevin, can you remind me the aspect ratio of ads on Pinterest versus Meta? Like those types of things you don't want to worry about and humans don't need to think about. So we really created a system and a workflow environment that allows marketers and content creators and performance marketers to think about build once, deploy everywhere. And when you deploy it everywhere across the channels that you want to spend on, that's when the flywheel effect becomes very powerful because each platform does give you some level of performance. You can measure that based on what you're seeing on your first party data and then start to either shift budgets or refresh content or change different systems about how you're going to market. We've often seen over the last 10 years, a lot of technology built on optimizations and audience and targeting and measurement, not a lot on the creative lever. And to your point, Kevin, what's the thing that I see as a consumer? It's the content, it's the CTA, it's the text. So being able to now quickly test and learn, explore, exploit at the creative level, as well as the budget and audience level, really becomes the left to right end-to-end platform that marketers have been dying for.
That's great. Thanks for the additional context there. Obviously, any platforms that rely on data, whether it's the walled gardens themselves or anything that's assisting better deployment of budget within the walled gardens and across the walled gardens and open RTB as well, the more data you have available, the more effectively or the more quickly, in particular, a system can learn, right? Because there's statistical relevance that you reach either quickly with a big marketer and more slowly over a small marketer. So for what you guys have built, what's that sweet spot where, all your system can learn quickly enough because it's a significantly large marketer, where you really add the most value, right? Because for a big CPG brand, you can probably start showing value very, very quickly. And for a DTC brand, maybe it takes a little more time for that data to matriculate and for the right creative to float to the surface.
I love this question just because I'm a measurement nerd. I often say measurement is in the eye of the beholder. So each brand thinks about value, economic value to the business in different ways. So, for example, if you are a car company, yes, you want to move units off your dealerships, but you also want to be resonating with your customers when the top of mind matters the most. You're thinking about brand, you're thinking about mid funnel. How do you measure the effectiveness of a digital ad to move a unit is very different than if I'm selling a running shoe, which can move far faster. So we think a lot about this both by industry, as well as marketer by marketer. And what we've learned are two things. One, every advertiser thinks about value and measurement in a unique way, and we're able to integrate and plug in. So whether you have a source of truth where you house your first party data, or you have your CRM system, or you're leaning onto platform data, we can optimize both on those inputs. And the second thing is there's a combination of what you've done and what we can open your eyes on, which we think moves the needle moving forward. So we think about this flywheel effect. How do you move from data to generating and creating more scaled assets? We call that the data to creative. From that content and creative, how do you generate economic value or performance? And then that performance data flows back into the data module when you think about AI and having this self-learning loop. So the reality is we have a point of view when we start, but as you run more and more campaigns, call it the best data flows to the top, or the most interesting data flows to the top. And that's when we can help you on, hey, this is where we're seeing creative fatigue moments. This is where we think we should do a creative refresh. Or these assets are really good with lower funnel, not as well with mid funnel. Let's adapt them. And you start to provide creative intelligence back to the performance marketer and to the creative teams in a unified platform. And that's where you think about transformation and change. Most of the time, these organizations have siloed tools and siloed views of what's happening in the market. Adora brings them together. And that's the benefit for having creatives and performance marketers together in one system to utilize the flywheel of data, creative, and performance.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think of it also from the perspective of compound marketing, which is your ability to afford an auction media is directly in relationship to the value of the click, but also the way the creative resonates, right? So bad creative, but otherwise perfect campaign still fails because you can't afford the click or the impression because the creative wasn't good, right? You're having good creative, whether you call it a quality score or anything else, right? You got to have the good creative. And that becomes powerful. It allows you to afford media that was otherwise unaffordable. So I think, that can end up being quite transformative in a hyper competitive market, right? And these days, which platform isn't hyper competitive? They pretty much all are, for sure.
Totally, Kevin. And I'll say, I'm not Don Draper. I'm a colorblind engineer from New York City. I have no idea what ads are going to work ahead of time, but we're going to go figure it out. And I think through that flywheel and that explore exploit mentality where split testing platforms have been built for years, we bring that power back to the marketer to go do that at their own scale and, more importantly, at their own velocity.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I've had to go through the learning experience myself running an agency, right? Where maybe 15 years ago, when we had creative directors that were much more hands-on in creating creative, we came through this realization that we shouldn't worry about who created the creative, right? Because once influencer marketing took off, sometimes the best creative was a micro influencer that, didn't even have a name. Sometimes it was a mid-sized influencer that had a name and had great creative. And this idea of someone owning the creative was somewhat antiquated, right? I'm not sure all the agencies have come to that epiphany yet, where, they can empower platforms and influencers and creators and the agency all to independently ideate and then add AI onto it to really create the very best creative. And I think that's where it's going. Certainly the platforms would love to take over creative as well, but I guess you have a difference of opinion on whether or not they're in the best position to do that.
Kevin, I think it's a great point. I'll say two things. I think one, this idea of variations and variety, we're seeing with our own customers, that matters a ton. And by the way, most of the platforms that are really great at matching content to people, they'll say the same thing I'm saying. You need more content. The problem is it's really hard to get high quality, authentic content on behalf of a brand that they feel good about put out into the market. Now, I'll let everybody gets to decide who owns the eye, right? Who is the approver? Who is the decider of what good content looks like? I personally believe that should reside with the brand owner. The person who thinks about the brand expression, what their brand stands for, they should own the experiences their customer has. And in my opinion, we want to build technology and platforms that allow the creative art director really to control that. All that said, the thing that we focus on is performance. So, how do we help a business drive economic value? Part of that is return on your ad spend. Part of that is velocity and speed. Part of that is workflow management. And how do you move a lot faster to hit the outcomes that you're looking for? So, we see the platforms as places that will not get replaced. You're still matching content to people, but we think about Adora as the supercharger that you need, and also the ability to get granular insights because larger advertisers are not just spending in one place. You have a choice of where you can place your dollars. What we want to do is help you with that choice, not for the current dollar, but for the incremental dollar. What's your biggest bang for your buck? And I think to your point, the right ad at the right time to the right person, like that still is elusive in today's market. And with so many walled gardens and so many different choices, we're trying to help advertisers navigate it. And oh, by the way, we haven't even talked about consumers shifting where they're spending their time because of AI and human computing. But that's where we see the puck going, and really how to think about advertisers helping.
Yeah, for sure. And one other thing about creative that isn't always on everybody's radar is, each platform has different burnout rates as
Yeah.
to creative, right? And in some platforms, the same creative can have a fair amount of longevity to it, and on other platforms, because there's such a highly concentrated customer set that burn through a lot of paid user impressions or whatever you want to call it, you reach the point of diminishing returns on a per creative basis pretty quickly, right? And so you have to have diversity. You have to have, it needs to be new, it has to be fresh. So I would assume your platform automatically understands the relative velocities of change which are needed on a platform by platform basis.
Yes. And I think the point you're making, which is spot on, is every platform is unique. How do you crack the code on each one's? And sure, you can have a team of people that are focused on Meta or Pinterest or any other of the RTB channels. But the reality is an AI model that is actually built specifically for your brand that can interact with these makes it far more powerful and more importantly can move at what we call the speed of culture. And that's where we see a lot of the power really shifting and this democratization of technology shifting the balance back into the hand of the marketer. And we think Adora is a really good example of where advertisers can sort of leapfrog their competition by bringing this more closer to themselves.
Yeah. Do you feel like, in general, it's going to be the brands working with you directly, or do you feel like the agencies, because they are the stewards of the brand dollars, or the business's dollars, are often in a good position to continue to play a big role?
Kevin, I love this question. I have a hot take on it. Look, I think the world of agencies continue to evolve. And the idea that agencies provide a valuable service to marketing departments will continue to be true. The question is, what level of service are they providing? And as you know, there are creative agencies, there are digital strategist agencies, there are agencies that still do Super Bowl commercials. So I think the role of the agency will continue to exist. The question is how it evolves. For me, I'm a technologist. And one of the powers of technology is really leveling the playing field to bring in power in places that you've typically had humans take on, you can now sort of expand on the human capabilities and the power that humans can drive through these workflow systems. So I think you're going to see kind of two models evolve simultaneously. One, and you've seen this over the last 10 years, large brands in-housing. I think that continues. I think the level of sophistication certain brands have today will evolve, and they are seeing technology create a more evolved state in what they can go do on top of themselves. I also believe that agencies will evolve with technology and the services that they can provide for other brands that maybe don't want to have this core competency in house, but really want to rely on an agency. I think the level of service that they can go provide will be sort of compounded over time. So we have two models. We work with agencies directly and we work with brands directly. And what we've seen is the level of service that certain brands want to have a managed service. That's where agencies really have a strong foothold in because they have teams trained or super sophisticated in this with humans on keyboards on behalf. With other brands that say, no, 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 we want to do this ourselves. We've been doing this ourselves. We want more capabilities. We can also work directly with brands. So I definitely see the place for both, but it's really dependent on how the brand is structured and where they want to go.
Yeah, I would somewhat agree with you. I find that, so many gigantic brands, whether they're DTC brands or businesses in general, this isn't purely brands. Sometimes there's like almost like 101 level stuff that they still are not executing on. And some of it is technology is a headwind. I'll give you an example, like optimizing around ROAS versus LTV, right? There's a huge difference between your average customer and your top decile. Yet so few companies can even isolate exactly what their top quartile and decile look like, what makes them different, so that they can empower the entire media team and earned media team to find more of those people, right? And sure, CDPs are helping that, and better CRMs and better business intelligence are helping that. But so many businesses are still aspirational there. And, sometimes the agency has gone through that process so many times with clients, they can provide sort of a hand-holding and assistance for that kind of a situation. But there's also other weird dynamics where we'll discover something for a roofing company that works. And we'll be like, oh, I wonder if that would work for this tax abatement company. Oh, let's try it. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work. And so just the diversity of industry type and the diversity of client type, even within the same industry category, I do feel like, at least for the time being, until the AIs get super smart, right, there will be an opportunity to take these learnings. And that doesn't even count the fact that you have like a built-in redundancy complex with an agency, right? Your knowledge base doesn't walk out the door. And maybe your platform actually, to some extent, preserves that, right? Because I think one of the things that the brands are struggling with constantly is the churn of people, right? And so you end up with somebody has gone through these 16 experiments with a platform, and then they leave with the institutional knowledge. So I'd love your point of view on that.
I mean, that was amazing. It's funny because I agree with you. I think we oftentimes assume that within an industry is how you should be thinking. And we lose sight of what are the similarities of customer experiences, both on a one-time sale, but also on a relationship. Like there's a lot of synergies across industries that I do think agencies are uniquely positioned to both understand and provide. To your last point around tribal knowledge and making sure that stays preserved, this is where I think a platform like Adora, and we call it AI memory, is going to be leaps and bounds better than what humans are capable of. And more importantly, everybody thinks about AI as taking human jobs. This is where I think it's going to create a step function change in how humans do their work. Imagine the smartest brain at your company that is constantly learning. It has the context of the past and it's learning about the present. And it's also starting to decide predictions about the future that it's going to go test. To your point, that's usually in spreadsheets and some Google Docs and some whiteboards. Now that gets consolidated into one place. And not only is that consolidating to one place that the technology is powered off of, but that humans have access to. So your first employee or your next employee who starts on Monday immediately has the same level of context and knowledge that somebody's been with the company for years and years and years. And you've never seen the power of that before. So think about onboarding moving a lot faster, thinking about that tribal knowledge that is truly unlocked, but is preserved as the organization transforms. And you said it really well. Like there's a moment in time right now happening where organizations are thinking about what the next few years looks like and how do they prepare for that moment. You need the time and the place to put in technology to guide you on where you're going. And I think AI will make that far, far easier. And the companies doing it best in class that we've seen are the ones investing in that AI memory today.
So this may not be part of Adora's current suite, but probably something you're thinking about a little bit, which is obviously, optimizing all the front end and then not having landing pages resonate and pay off on the promise that was made in the ads is key, right? Because and then optimizing that entire string, much more complex on a B2B sale than many low involvement B2C sales, but even some of the more complex B2C sales like cars and appliances and such, right? That people don't just add it to cart and check out. And so, where does optimization fit in on the landing pages, on the consumer touch points, on the consumer experience? I mean, in the end, like for a car dealer, you'll never AI control the salesperson, but at the same time, everything up until that point where the human talks to the human, there's opportunities for improvement for sure.
Oh, totally. And we've been living this world for years, right? How many times has a customer seen an ad from DCO, dynamic content optimization, or a shopping ad where you're like, oh, that's on sale. I want it. And you click on it, and then the price is reverted back or completely changed. So, what you're describing has been around for years. I think this is where, if you have too many hops in the system, that's where you have the opportunity for things to go poorly on the customer journey. So, by having advertisers and brands empowering themselves to really own the customer experience as much as possible, and the channels be powered through the data systems that the brands own, you have a much tighter and seamless experience on behalf of the customer. And by the way, some of this is how do I get you into my funnel? Another part of this is how do I reach out to you and re-engage you who as an existing customer or somebody who's in the middle of an experience. And then all the way to post-sale, right? How do I do customer satisfaction? How do I do surveys? So I actually think brands have been investing in this lifetime customer journey for years. Where there's a really cool opportunity is how do you think about your first touch and your many touch on the marketing side? And then how does that traverse that I'm making sure that every time Kevin works with my brand in whatever capacity it is, he's having a delightful experience, one that's meaningfully moving, and two, also has memory, right? The way I treat Kevin as a first time customer versus Marco, who's been a shopper for years, should be vastly different, even if we're both in market for a pair of running sneakers. So I think that memory, the ability for brands to evolve, especially in a GEO world coming out, I just think is going to be really fascinating. But the key is who's starting today, who's creating the right infrastructure internally. And I think those that are combining their data silos with their marketing outcomes as well as their customer tracking, those are going to be able to deliver the best in class experiences.
For sure. Well, the final question, I guess, has to do with something where it's almost like an existential question for certain portions of the ad channel, because it just flew into my head when we were thinking agentically, right? Is I may actually empower my bot, whether it's a claw bot or something similar, right? But those will evolve in the next 6 months because they're already evolving in the last month. But if I give a set of constraints to my sneaker shopping bot, right, and they're engaging with the platforms via API or MCP, then the ability for those platforms to push my emotional buttons, which is what great advertising often does, it's going away, right? The agent is immune to emotional levers, right? And it's perhaps shopping on a completely different set of trade-off analyses, right, that are much more quantifiable. And price is probably a big one, right? So that becomes a race to the bottom for brands and retailers. So, any predictions as to the future and how marketers should think about that happening in parallel with the platforms continuing to evolve?
There's so much in what you just described, and some of it is real, some of it's science experiments, some of it is also a little bit of guessing. So I won't speculate too much, but I will say the human psychology and why we buy, I think, continues to be a fundamental human experience. Now, whether you have an agent that understands emotion or doesn't, it will have to understand your preferences. Why do people buy brand X versus brand Y? The reality is it's a personal choice. Is it all the TV commercials you've been seeing since you were 10 years old? Or is it really because you have a particular view of the world or cultural moment and you want to align with a brand that has an ethos that's aligned to yours? Or it's just give me the best product for the cheapest price, right? So, like, the reason to buy, and this is why I love advertising, is constantly evolving, and how marketers show up to their consumers. This is what's exciting about the way the world's being written today, which is we're not sure exactly how this will evolve and change. I think we have an understanding, but this idea of direct buying has been around for 10 years, right? So you've seen a lot of the walled gardens play their hand in sort of like direct shopping and product catalogs and things like that. This has been another form of that, agents talking to other agents and buying on that. The question is, how good of an experience is it? And how do I, as a consumer, decide what is the right thing for me to go buy? Because I still have to power my agent or my buying system with my preferences. I have size 13 feet, and there's certain shoes that just fit me better than others. I need them to know that. So there's a lot of my own history that I need to train it on. There's a lot of my own preferences that I need to train on. And also, what's cool out there, right? What are things that are about new technology or new brands that are doing that I don't know about? And that's where I think brands will have a really cool opportunity to participate in. So marketing, I don't think, is changing. It's human storytelling, and it's really understanding the reason to buy and how do you affect and really cause change in the human psyche with a consumer from a brand's perspective. What's really changing are the interfaces. But the decision is still me. At the end of the day, I'm still deciding what to buy. I don't know if we're anywhere sure of just like, yeah, buy me whatever. I trust the AI system to go do it. Because when I look at my flights, I have preferences, or I look at the choices I want to buy my wife for her birthday coming up. Like, I'm thinking a lot about it. I'm at a place where I'm just like letting AI do everything. It's going to offer me recommendations and it's going to source all these inputs, but I still am in control of that. And I think knowing that humans, at the end of the day, this is humans talking to humans. The interfaces will be what's evolving and changing. And I think that gives an opportunity for brands on how to show up differently in very different spaces.
Well, that's an excellent way to tie it all together. So thanks so much, Marco, for joining me. Lots of great insights, and thanks for explaining the origin story and where you guys fit into the ecosystem with Adora. Appreciate it.
Kevin, thank you so much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.